Hi all, welcome to my channel. My name is Janet. Today I'm going to talk to you about equipment that you can use in Pilates to elevate your workout. Now, whether you are starting out in your Pilates journey or you have been doing it for a while and you want to work out how to maximize your workouts, here is a bunch of equipment that you can possibly use to help you get there. Obviously, there is a ton of equipment out there. You do not have to buy all of them, and there's pros and cons and value to all different types of equipment that you could possibly use. So I'm going to list them today for you in the order of my preference, from probably the least useful or the ones that are the least popular amongst my participants, the ones that I don't like to use, up to the ones that I think if you're going to start off with one piece of equipment, this is the one you should get first in order to help you get fitter, healthier, and hit your fitness journey in a quicker capacity. Stay tuned for my number one option of equipment to get. Now let's get started. Okay, so my number 6 is the large fit ball. The reason why it is my number 6 is probably out of all the equipment that you can possibly get, this one will be probably the most expensive, and it's also hard to maneuver around. Most of the time, this ball is not gonna make any exercise easier, but actually add the complexity. And if you're new to Pilates, I find that this ball is the hardest to sort of work your way around. There's a lot of clumsiness that happens on the ball. People tend to fall over on them, or people tend to lose their balance very easily on this fit ball. So the sort of things that you can do on the fit ball obviously is sit on it, right? A lot of the times back in the days when I had one of these, I spent a lot of time just sitting on it, especially if you've got lower back issues and you don't want to sit on a normal chair. This will help you with your posture, just sitting on the ball. Also, I use this ball a lot just to test out your balance. You might start with your arms up, sitting on the ball, and you're lifting one leg up and then the other, and trying to see if you can balance both feet on the ball, right? That's what it's good for balancing wise. Otherwise, you can use it to help you with sit-ups. So you can roll it forward, hands go behind the head, and you're doing sit-ups, or you're maybe doing further down and doing bridges, like so. Other things you can do on it is push-ups and planks. So you can bring it underneath your belly button, hands coming forward, and do push-ups this way. This is a great beginner option, especially if you're just new to working your arms and your wrists are okay. You can do these ones. And then as you get more advanced, you come more forward until you can come all the way up onto your tippy toes on the ball. And then that will be your maximum sort of push-up positioning. Also with planking, you can bring your elbows down. This doesn't make it easier. I find that this makes planking harder than doing it on the floor because you've got this roll around that happen. So therefore, that's why I find these sort of balls quite risky to use, especially when you're a beginner, because you have to have very good core stability in order to keep it balanced on there, right? The other thing I use it for is abs. If you lie on the ground and ask people to hold the ball between the feet, and they have to extend it out and in, it is much more taxing to do with a large ball than with no ball or a small ball, just because you have to engage your inner thighs. And I find that with new Pilates participants or people that are just not too body aware as yet, your inner thighs are probably one of your weak points of the legs. People tend to use the big muscles like your quads and calves much more than their inner thighs, which is why I think this is good if you're a bit more experienced and you want to take your workouts to the next level. It's also the one thing that when I ask participants to use, I get the most growth out of, even to the point where a participant said if I used it again, she would just leave the class. So that's why I have it as my number 6. Okay, so for my number 5, I have chosen the Magic Pilates ring. Sometimes I'll call it the magic ring, the Pilates ring. Either way, it looks like this. It has 2 paddings on the side and it has a little bit of movement in the middle. Depending on the model you get, sometimes the resistance is very heavy, sometimes it's a little bit looser. The reason why this is my number 5 is I find that people don't like having this between their legs because it actually pushes on their skin and it sometimes it can hurt and it's not that comfortable to use. Again, similar with the fifth ball, I find with these, because they're so round and big, if your inner thighs are not quite strong yet, then if you find it very difficult to hold it in between the legs. And also, you can cheat very easily when you're using it for arms. So for example, if I'm asking participants to use this and press and try to create an oval shape with the hands, they could just go to here and it's very hard to monitor how deep they're going with it, right? If you go hold the ring in oval shape and lift the arm so that there's tension in it, easily as you get more tight, you can just let it go and there's no sort of indicator to you that you have actually let go of the tension of the ring. So you might be just focusing so much on the movement that you start to not engage it and therefore it's just not that effective. But if you do have one and you want to use it, the sort of things I would use it for is inner thigh work a lot. So if you're on your backs in bridge position, you will hold the padded bed just between the thighs and give it a squeeze so that you are trying to get that oval shape, hands beside you, and then we're just starting to lift up and down. So already from this, I can feel it digging into my skin. So depending on the model, sometimes it's a little bit nicer, sometimes a little bit harsher, but you can do these ones and then squeeze in and out. But again, that inner thigh area doesn't quite like that push with the pressure, which is why it's a little bit trickier. The other thing I use it for is abs. So you can hold always the ring to the outside, right, and push it out and in, and then that activates your outer thighs, and then you can start to do leg drops. Makes it a little bit harder than doing it without the ring because you have to hold the tension in the ring the whole time. Harder option is to have the ring in between the ankles like so and drop it down and up. The thing that I find is the most challenging, I make them do like circles or driving the car sort of motion. Really tricky if your inner thighs are not engaged. People tend to do it with your legs bent and then it sort of takes the effect away than holding it out. So with these rings, I find if you don't have flexible hamstrings or inner thigh strength or outer thigh control, you don't sort of work it to the maximum and it becomes a little bit awkward for the participants to use and also yourselves if you're not quite ready for that apparatus yet. The good thing I find about these is very good to help you with push-ups, provided you have holding it in the right spot. So you've got this sternum position, which is like this bony bit here that's quite firm. If you run your hand along it, you can actually balance it on there and pop it to the ground. And then if a push-up on your toes seems to be a lot more doable than if I didn't have the ring. So I find that is the advantage of these rings for push-ups, whether it's triceps, which is the narrow arms, or the wider arms, that is quite good. But the problem is people don't know exactly where to place it on their body. So if you are pushing it onto the lower bit of your stomach, that's not great for digestion, and it pushes and it feels like it's hurting because they haven't quite found that sternum position, which is why it's my number 5. Again, similar to the ball, awkward to maneuver if you're not used to using it or you don't have great body control yet. It's sometimes get a bit clumsy and you don't get the full benefit of what the apparatus is meant to do for you. Alright, so we've come to my number 4, which is the small ball, squishy ball, or the chi ball, by its proper name if you want to use it. The reason why it's my number 4 is not that readily available in all areas. I haven't found them in like a cheaper variety. Sometimes they're a little bit more costly, especially if you want one that won't pop out and deflate quickly. For a good quality one, I do think they're a little bit more expensive than certain other equipment that you can possibly buy for yourself, and I don't see them always that available in normal sports centers compared to some of my top 3 items. But the thing that this is used for is if you find the fit ball too hard to hold between the legs and too hard to maneuver, a lot of the moves that I use with the large fit ball that I showed you at number 6, you could use it for is trying to balance on your toes. So again, testing out your stability of your core and body, heels together, and then you drop into like squats It activates your posture, pulls in that belly button a little bit easier, and also if you don't have good balance, it will rock you and then it will tell you. So I find that with this little ball, I use a lot of it sometimes to try to get people to activate their deep core, those small muscles they don't know if it's switched on. Using this ball sort of tells you yes or no, it's on or it's not on. So if your balance is bad, this exposes you. Same if you do a lunge position and you have your right foot standing. If you're not quite in the right positioning for a lunge, so if, for example, my leg is behind the ball, the lunge becomes really awkward and shaky. But if I step it in the right position and my heel is up and I lift everything up, and then I can start to drop into a lunge position and I'll know I'm in the right positioning. But again, you need body awareness for that. So if you're beginners, standing on a ball is very awkward and it throws your balance off a lot. Whereas if people that are new, I take the ball away, so that's why it's not so useful and it's my number 4. The other thing though it can help you with is sit-up positions. If your neck is quite straight and you don't like going all the way back, you put it sort of in the middle part of your back. You have your legs bent, so it's already like cushion for you, and then you can roll back on the ball, come up into a sit-up, a little bit nicer than doing sit-ups straight on the ground. All right, and again, like I was saying, like we did with the fit ball, you pop the small one between the legs. It's easier to grab onto because you do not have to use so much width in your legs, and your inner thighs don't have to work as hard, and you can do the same sort of core exercises with the small ball as you would with the larger one, but easier to maneuver. So that's the other option I use with this. Also, people just like lying on it. So if you're doing side lie work, you can use this as a pillow to support your neck, because people don't like their necks hanging down. And then it's a little bit more comfortable when you do your side lying positionings, is what I like to use that small chi ball for. So the other thing the chi ball is good for is to actually work out if your deep core is switched on. What I do is I pop the ball underneath sort of my tailbone. So where the top of your sort of glutes finish, that line, that's where your tailbone is. You will pop it underneath as you lie down. So once you're on your backs, you are pulling your belly button right into the spine and squishing the ball with your ab muscles, like you've got a corset around it. Then you pop the hands beside you, and to test out if your core stability is actually switched on quite well, is you take the legs into tabletop position, right? And you're trying to balance, so the aim is not to fall off the ball and hold that tension in your abs. Then you start to take the arms up into the air, and if you're still holding the ball, then your deep core is on. Then to elevate that, to make it work even harder, you start to move your legs and arms. So you might just start moving a leg like you would do with normal dead bug on the ground, or you start to move the arms and legs together. Alright, so any move that asks you to sort of take yourself off center while still holding on your deep core into the ball will test out your stability. That I think is a great exercise to do with this ball to test out how your deep core is working today. Alright, so my number 3 equipment is the yoga block. Now I know some of you think that this is just for yoga, it's actually written in the name, but it is actually very useful for Pilates moves as well. A lot of the movements that you can do with the little chi ball that was on my number 4 can be achieved with the yoga block. And the reason why it's probably a little bit higher than the chi ball is because it is readily available. It's quite cheap now to buy. If you do, and it's useful if you do yoga and Pilates, because you can use it in both activities. So the sort of things that you would do with the yoga block, similar with the chi ball, is to elevate your workout for lunges. Whereas with the chi ball, you stood on it with the heel on. This offers a little bit more stability, so you can actually go a little bit deeper into your lunges. If you step on with one foot, make sure your feet are in parallel and take the other leg back so that you have a nice 90-degree stance, hands onto the hips, and I would get participants to lower that knee down and up And if I'm on the block, obviously I'm a little bit taller, which means my back leg has to work harder in order to go lower to the ground, and it activates more muscles in my quads, in my calves, and it just works that leg, I find, a little bit deeper. Obviously, people with knee issues that don't like to go that deep yet, or with hip issues, you probably would stay off the block, for instance. But if you want the depth on the block, is great. Also, I use it for balancing, especially if you want to lift your hip up above you. If you stand on the block, curl the toes up, it's easier for you to lift that hip and increase that mobility of that hip range. Whereas if you're on the ground, obviously you don't go as far. Standing on the block helps you lift that movement up and down, and it's also great for a balancing challenge. Moving the leg that is free from the block forward and back, that is very tricky. So doing that on the chi ball is a tricky move because that's wobbling about, whereas the block, I find, gives you more ankle stability, but gives you the range of height so that you can take that leg forward and back. So great for balancing in Pilates as well. It's harder to do arm work because obviously there's no weight and generally it's quite a light object. What you can do though is work the shoulders. If you bring them to the forearms, squeeze the block together, palms facing towards each other, lifting the arms, and just trying to lift the arms up and down. This is actually a drill a lot of people do in order to get their shoulders strong enough to do handstands. So you imagine what it's doing for your shoulders by squeezing out the block, pushing them against each other, and then lifting up and down, and pulling your belly button in without arching the back. So that also works your core at the same time. And just asking people to hold the block in the forearms and extending the arms, lifting them and extending them, definitely works the shoulders really hard. The other thing I will use the block for is guiding you how deep a push-up is. In Pilates, you might think we don't do a lot of push-up work, but there is a tricep push-up or an angled A push-up. Generally, I will pop the block underneath the chest, hands beside it, chest over the block, tummy muscle pulled in, and you ask them to tap the chest to the block. So that way they know how deep they need to go in order to get that arm activation as a guide. The other thing I would use the block for is similar to what I use the chi ball or the fit ball or the ring for, is holding it between my feet, activating my inner thighs. For instance, if I'm lying on the side, holding it like so, high up, legs extended, lifting your body and asking you to lift up and down, engages that inner thigh movement. Or if you are on your backs, holding that block between the feet, legs in tabletop position, extending out and in, is a little bit easier to do than with the big fit ball or the magic ring, but still affects your inner thigh activation, takes the load out of your hip flexor, and does pretty much what a little chi ball does. So this is what I normally use. If you don't find a chi ball, but you have a yoga block, it will do the same thing for you, which is why it's generally my number 3. Okay, so we've come to my top 2 and 1. I'm going to do them together because I find them both equally as good as each other. The only reason why one wins over the other is the easiness of how beginners learn to use the equipment. Maybe because it's more common and it doesn't create as much awkward movements. So therefore, at my number 2, I am going to say it is my resistance band here. right? So generally a long one with a bit of tension in it is what you want, not too hard. I know they come in different levelings. Sometimes you can get a packet that has 3 different gradings, like a easy, a medium, and a hard, where you'll notice if you pull against them, they have like less springiness basically. One is like when you pull it out, it's very easy. One is like, oh, my arms are starting to work a little bit harder. And there's one is like, this is impossible to open. When you sort of start to elevate your muscles, when you start to get stronger, obviously you'll get to the heart and feel like you can manage to actually open the straps a bit wider. The reason why this is my number 2 is basically you can hit every body part very, very easily. You can do arms with them, you can do legs with them, and you can use it for core. You can also use it to help you with some stretch moves in the class if you can't quite reach the toes in your flexibility yet. And then my number 1 is the weights. Whether it's light weights or heavy weights, all weights in a workout would definitely add to your workout. Reason why it is my number 1 is it's not that awkward. People are very used to it. It's very easily available. You can get them anywhere now in Kmart, in Target, in sportswear, or you can get in sports places, or you can get them online. And they're relatively affordable, especially the lighter ones. Obviously, as you get heavier, they will get more expensive. But I would say with Pilates, I don't really go any higher than 5 kilos. It would be 5 kilos, and with 5 kilos I start getting participants or myself, I will use both hands to maneuver that weight rather than 5 kilos in each hand. So you really just need 1 heavy medium weight and 2 light weights, and you can find alternatives to weights as well. If you don't have weights, you can just pick up something heavy around the house, so it's easily replaced, easily to maneuver for beginners to advanced, and you can do a lot of things with them as well. With the bands for arms, generally I will get people to either kneel on them or stand on them. If people don't like to be on their knees, obviously you would just be standing with your feet on them, depending how long they are, and you can just start doing bicep curls like so, shoulder extensions like so, and and you can easily make them more resistance by just twirling them around and making them shorter, and at the same time your abs are switched on. So very easily to work your arms in very different ways, which I can do classes for. Just leave it in the comments if you would like a class on resistance bands. And you can also use them on legs, whether you're doing side lying work on the ground, and then hold the resistance and lift that leg up and down, forward and back, right? Same thing as if you did no resistance band. The only difference is because there's now that resistance, it works harder quicker. So you might be getting fitter in your legs, getting stronger, and you want to take it to the next level, I would use it for that. Right? Also for back work, if you're lying on the ground, taking the straps above and opening up the shoulders, bringing it back in, is a great maneuver for these strap bands. So they're very versatile, pretty easy to get, but can be clumsy if you're not quite used to it. Also, the other thing, the only reason why also it makes it my number 2 is depending on the brand you get, sometimes they break quite easily and they might snap off. And then if it snaps off and it flicks you in the face, you get this like fear about using it and pushing it too hard. Right, so that's why it's only there because of those few reasons. Otherwise, it is definitely around my top 1 or 2 that I use the most, that I think is an effective movement for everybody else. And then finally with the weights, obvious, right? For arms, you take it up high and low, circle it around, do lots of different arm exercises, which makes it tougher. This also can be done obviously in Pilates without weights, but as you're getting stronger, use the weights to power up. Then I would hold the weights just for pure resistance, coming into lunges, coming into squats, right? Just to make more resistance. It's like adding more kilos to your body. You burn more fat just by having more kilos, but you don't want to actually put it on with fat, so you add it with weight resistance. And then as you get stronger, easily enough just to swap them up, and you can track it from 1 kilo, 2 kilos, 3 kilos of what your progression is. So very easy to use. And then the other thing you could use it for is if you're on your backs and you're doing sit-up positions, you're having the weights in the hand and you're having the legs come out and in, and then you're holding the weights just to add more resistance and just to add more complexity. Right, and not too hard to get it wrong. Easy equipment to use. Technique-wise, generally most people, regardless of their journey on Pilates, will be able to use this no problems. Hence why it's my number one. Thanks so much for listening to my talk on all the equipment that is available for Pilates. Obviously, there are definitely some more equipment out there that I didn't go through, but that I can in the future if you want. Just leave it in the comments if you want to see me do any explanations for other equipments that are out there. But hopefully, if you want to elevate your workout now, you've got a clear idea of what sort of equipment you might go out and purchase. Cheap, online, wherever, but they should definitely help you get to the next level of fitness for yourself. If you have enjoyed the content, please let me know and leave some comments or like my video. Definitely subscribe to help my little channel grow, and I'll see you on the next one. Bye.